types of shares: deferred shares, equity shares, preference shares. Deferred shares, equity shares, preference shares. Three kinds of shares. Today I am going to explain you in detail. What are these three? What are these three types of shares? So before that, I want to explain a little bit or in continuation of the last class we have discussed. Okay, the last class, the topic was capital structure of a joint stock company. So the capital structure of a joint stock company, how the capital is arranged, how the capital is arranged in a joint stock company. So the main aim or the main function of the promoter is to arrange the finance, secure the finance. Okay, without finance, so there is no activity, there is no further movement. Okay, so how the joint stock companies makes arrangement of the capital. Okay, so we already know the joint stock companies issues shares as well as debentures to secure to get arrangement of the capital from the public from the public. Okay, so in general the joint stock company requires three kinds of capital. three kinds of three kinds here. It is a long term capital, medium term capital, short term capital. Okay, long term capital, medium term capital, short term capital. So the long term capital is more than 10 years for purchasing a fixed assets. So it is termed as it is stated as it is comes under a fixed capital category. So once the building is purchased, once the machinery is purchased, okay, it is throughout the lifetime of a company, throughout the lifetime of a joint stock company. Okay, so it is the arrangement comes under the fixed capital, fixed capital, right? So the second one, working capital, to meet day to day business operations, to day to day business activities. There is a need of working capital to meet day to day expenditure, day to day expenditure, like purchasing raw materials or giving salaries. Okay, so daily expenditure, it is like a fuel, rent or wages, like that. So these comes under the category of working capital. Okay, so the working capital, the total fixed capital and the working capital is the finance or the capital arrangement made the joint stock company is again classified into long term, medium term and short term. Long term, medium term and short term category. So short term, medium term, long term. The long term, that is more than 10 years. Okay, that is more than 10 years of duration. And the medium term, that is 5 to 10 years of a duration, right? And the short term is, that is 6 months minimum, and the maximum is 2 years, that is below 2 years, we can say that is below 2 years. And this medium term and the long term capital, medium term and long term capital is arranged by issuing shares and debentures, by issuing shares and debentures, shares as well as debentures, right? So this point I have already covered in the last class. The companies, the joint stock companies makes arrangements of the capital requirements that is fixed capital and medium or long term capital and medium term capital comes under fixed capital category. Okay, so by issuing shares and debentures, right? And the next one, that is short term capital. So short term capital, generally the companies will take loans and advances or deposits from the general public by paying higher rate of interest, by paying high rate of interest or higher rate of interest. The loans or advances, the loans and advances will take from the other financial institutions or general public. It may be other financial institutions or general public, general public by paying higher rate of interest compared to shareholders as well as debenture holders. The companies will pay more and more rate of interest to the loans or to the loans or advances taken from the financial institution or the general public. So over than the shares as well as debenture. Okay, so this is the procurement of short term capital to meet day to day expenditure. Okay, comes under the working capital. So here we have to remember only 2 points. 2 points. So those points are: the companies arrange the fixed capital by issuing shares and debentures. Shares and debentures. Right. Second point is the companies makes arrangement working capital for to meet day to day expenditure. So by taking loans or deposits from the public or other financial institution at an higher rate of interest compared to the shareholders, that is shares and debentures. Shares and debentures. So in this class I am going to explain the shares. What is a share? What are the different types of shares? What are the features of shares? Okay, so who are called as the shareholders? Okay, so different kinds of shares, right? And the next class, the coming class or next class, the remaining one, that is debentures. Okay, debenture and the types of debentures and so on. Okay, in this class we are going to learn the share. Okay, share and features of shares and different types of shares, different types of share. So in the last class we have seen there are three different types of shares. There are three different types of shares, that is equity, preference, deferred shares. Equity shares, preferred shares and deferred shares. Okay, so the shares are the best source for long term financial resources. Shares are the best source for long term financial resources. Shares are the best source for long term financial resources. So the long term financial resources, the company needs long term finance, long term capital. So to make the arrangements of long term capital, so the shares are the best source, the best way to the joint stock companies to procure long term financial sources by issuing shares. So once the shares are invested by the general public in the company, okay, so once the shares are invested, the general public will invest the capital in the form of shares in a joint stock company. Okay, that cannot be repaid. That cannot be repaid. Okay, that can be paid only when the winding up of the company. only when the winding up of the company. Okay, once the shares are purchased or shares are issued, once the shares are purchased, shares are issued, shares are invested by the general public, shares are invested by the general public. Okay, so that cannot be paid, the share capital cannot be paid back to the investor. So the people who invest the money in the companies in the form of shares are called as shareholders of the company, are called as shareholders of the company, and they are the real owners of the company. They are the real owners of the company. Once they invest the money in the company in the form of a share, it may be any kind of share, either equity share or preference share or deferred share. The share it may be, it is called as a share. Mostly the share amount cannot be paid back, only they get dividend on the share. So the dividend is depends upon the profits the company they get. The rate of dividend, the rate of dividend is depends upon the profits which the company gets. Yes. So the company gets more profits, the shareholders will get more dividend. Okay, so if the company is in the losses, the shareholders won't be paid dividend. Okay, the company gets the profits, only the shareholders will be paid dividend, will be paid dividend, because the shareholders are the real owners of the company. The shareholders are the real owners of the company. So the owners, whenever the business is in profits, only the owner will be benefited, otherwise the owner has to wait. Okay, so here also in the same way, the shareholders are called as the real owners of the company, and they get profit or they get dividend. Okay, we call it as a dividend, the amount which they get on the investment in the company, that is on the share. Okay, that is called as only the dividend, not profit, not interest. It is a dividend, it is a piece of profit, the profit which the promoters paid to the shareholders on their investment uh, for a particular period of time. Okay, that interest, that amount is called as a dividend. The company gets profits, only they will be paid dividend, otherwise they won't get dividend on the shares. And the share investment will be paid back to the shareholders only the winding up of the company, winding up of the company. Okay, the shares are the best source to arrange the long term financial resources. The shares are the best source to arrange long term financial resources. Okay, so here the shares can be different categories: preference shares, equity shares, deferred shares. Equity shares, preference shares, deferred shares. The shares are three categories, three different categories: preference, equity, and deferred. So what is a share? First of all, we have to understand the term what is a share, why we calling it as a share. So here the point is the total capital or the authorized capital of a company. The authorized capital of a company is divided into equal parts, is divided into number of equal parts, number of units with a definite face value, with a definite face value. The authorized capital of a joint stock company is divided into, is divided into units called definite face value, with a definite face value. So holders of these shares are called as shareholders or members of a company. So the total authorized, the total capital requirement Okay, the total capital required for a company is called as authorized capital. So the authorized capital is divided into equal parts, equal number of units with a definite face value. The people who invest, who purchases shares in the company, who invest the amount in the company as the form of shares are called as shareholders of the company, or members of the company, or owners of the company. Shareholders of a company, members of a company, or owners of the company. So the company issues a prospectus. The company issues a prospectus. Okay, a prospectus is nothing but inviting people to invest the money in the form of a shares, in the form of a shares. Shares are offered to the public for subscription. Shares are offered to the public for subscription. A share is an indication of interest in the company. Okay, so the people who are purchasing shares in the company is nothing but the people who are purchasing shares are nothing but they have interest in the company to invest the money. It is nothing but it shows the people who are investing money in the company. It shows the interest, it shows their interest on the company. Okay, so the holders of the shares are called as shareholders of the company. Okay, so here a definition, that is section 2 of 46, section 2 of 46 of the Indian Companies Act. Section 2 of 46 of Indian Companies Act defines the term share as a share in the share capital of a company. Section 2 of 46 of the Indian Companies Act. Section 2 of 46 of the Indian Companies Act defines the term share as a share in the share capital of a company. A share in the share capital of a company. Right? So, as per the section 2 of 46 of the Indian Companies Act, defines the term share as a share in the share capital. A share in the share capital. The total capital is divided into, the authorized capital of a company is divided into number of units. Each unit is called as a share. A share is a share capital. An amount, an equal part, a unit, a definite face value. A share is a face value or a unit. Okay, a unit. The total, for example, the total authorized capital of a company is divided into, for example, say 100 unit. Out of this 100 unit, each and every unit is called as a share. A share is a share in the share capital of a company. Then, in other words, Justice Farewell, a share is the interest of the shareholder in the company, measured by a sum of money for the purpose of liability and interest dividend. It is also consists of other rights given by the articles. It also consists of other rights given by the articles. It also consists of other rights given by the articles. So here the thing is, in other words of justice farewell, a share is the interest of shareholders in the company. Okay, a share is a share in the share capital of a company, and a share is nothing but an interest. The people who are investing the money in the company have an interest to invest the company. So it is called as the interest of the people, interest of the shareholder in the company. So it is measured by a sum of money. It is measured by a sum of money for the purpose of liability and interest. Liability and interest. And it is also consists of other rights given by the articles. It is also consists of other rights given by the articles. It also consists of other rights given by the articles. Okay, here we have two definitions. Number one, that is section 2 of 46 of Indian Companies Act. Section 2 of 46 Indian Companies Act defines the term share as a share in the share capital of a company. A share in the share capital of a company. And second, or other words, Justice Farewell defines a share is the interest of the shareholder of the company. A share is the interest of the shareholder of the company. It is the sum of money. It is the sum of money. It is measured by a sum of money for the purpose of liability and interest, that is dividend. It also consists of all other rights given by the. So the shareholders rights and responsibilities are already defined in the articles of association. Okay, so when the incorporation of the company, the promoters has to prepare articles of association and memorandum of association. So in that articles of association, so the rights and the responsibilities of shareholders are defined already defined in the articles of association. Okay, so that's why it also consists of the other rights given by the articles. It also consists of the other rights given by the articles. So there are two important documents in the process of incorporation of a joint stock company. So we already know the two important procedures, steps in the process of incorporation of a joint stock company. So that is memorandum of association and articles of association. Okay, in the articles of association, so the rights and responsibilities of the shareholders are clearly defined, are clearly mentioned in articles of association. So here we have to observe and we have to remember the point is, the point we have to remember is a share is a share is a share in the share is a share in the share capital of a company. Okay, a share is a share in the share capital of a company. Okay, so I have already told you one example. So that is, say the total authorized capital of a company is divided, or the total units is say 1000 units. Total is 1000 units, and each unit will have a definite face value, and each unit is called as a share. Each unit is called as a share. So the people who invest, who purchases these shares are called as the shareholders of the company. The people who purchases these shares are called as the shareholders of the company. Shareholders of the company. Okay, so the shareholders rights and responsibilities are already clearly defined in the articles of association of each and every company. The shareholders will get only dividend. It is called as a dividend, the amount which they get at the end of year. Okay, on their investment in the company is called as a dividend, and it is not fixed. It is not fixed. The dividend is not fixed, and it is not defined. The rate of interest of a shareholder is not defined, because it depends upon the profits the company which may get. Okay, so if the company is getting more and more profits, then the shareholder will get the more dividend. The shareholder will get more dividend, right? So if the company is in loss, the shareholders won't get any dividend. So the shareholders are the real owners of the company. The shareholders are the real owners of the company. And the share capital won't be repaid back. then the share capital repaid only if the amount is available at the time of winding up of a company, so this is about the shares. And the share capital of the company is meant for long term requirements during the lifetime of the company. The share capital of the company is meant for long term requirements during the lifetime of the company. The share capital of the company is meant for long term requirements. Okay, so we already know the company requires three things, that is long term capital, medium term capital, and short term capital. So for this long term and medium term capital, to make an arrangement of this long term and medium term capital, the companies issues shares as well as debentures. Okay, so here the share is nothing but the share value in the share capital of a company with a definite face value. Okay, the shares are the shareholders of the share. So the futures of shares, the next one is futures of shares. So it is a subdivision of the capital of a company. It is a subdivision of the capital of a company measured by a sum of money. It is a subdivision of the capital of a company measured by a sum of money. Okay? It is a subdivision of the capital of a company measured by a sum of money. Each share has a distinct number for identifying its holder. Each share has a distinct number for identifying its holder. A share confers certain rights on its holder. A share confers certain rights on its holder. A share certificate is issued. A share certificate is issued. A share certificate is issued. A share certificate is issued to the shareholder under the seal of the company. A share certificate is issued. A share certificate is issued. A share certificate is issued under the seal of the company. Each share is assigned a nominal or face value which is paid by its holder. Each share is assigned a nominal or a face value. A share a share a share a share a share certificate is issued. A share certificate is issued to the shareholder under the seal of company. Each share is assigned a nominal or face value which is paid by its holder. Which is paid by its holder. Which is paid by its holder. Every year dividend is paid out of the profits to shareholder. So these are the futures of shares. These are the futures of shares. Okay, so it is a subdivision of the capital of a company measured by a sum of money. It is a subdivision of the capital of a company measured by a sum of money. Each share has a distinct number for identifying its holder. Okay, so here it is a subdivision of the capital. So it is a subdivision of capital means what? The total capital or the entire capital is divided into number of parts. The total or entire capital is divided into number of parts, and each part is called as a subdivision. Each called as a subdivision capital. So in this one I have said already, I told one example, that is, so say 1000 units. So 1000 units is called, each unit is called as a subdivision of a share capital. Subdivision of a share capital of a company. It is measured by units. Okay, 1 unit, 2 unit, 3 unit. Each unit is called as subdivision of the total unit. And each share has a distinct number for identifying its holder. Each share has a distinct number. A person can purchase 1 share, 2 share, 3 shares, 10 shares, 100 shares, or 500 shares, depending upon his interest and capacity. Depending upon the person's interest and capacity. Okay, depending upon the person's interest and capacity, he may purchase a number of shares, and a shareholder confers certain rights on its holder. A shareholder have certain rights and responsibilities. Shareholders have certain rights and responsibilities. A shareholder have certain rights and responsibilities on his shares. Okay, these rights and responsibilities are defined in the articles of the association. Memorandum of association, we already know memorandum of association and articles of association, so that is defined in that one. Okay, a share certificate is issued to the shareholder under the seal of company, right? For each and every shareholder, okay, the company issues after allotting the shares, after allotment of the shares completed. Okay, so each and every shareholder will get a share certificate, will get a share certificate. Each and every shareholder will get a share certificate. Okay, so a share certificate is issued to the shareholder under the seal of the company. A share certificate is issued to the shareholder under the seal of the company. Each share is assigned a nominal or face value which is paid by its holder. Each share is assigned a nominal or face value which is paid by its holder. Every year dividend is paid out of profits to shareholder. Each share is assigned a nominal or face value. Each share is assigned a nominal or face value which is paid by its holder. Which is paid by its holder. Every year dividend is paid. Every year dividend is paid out of profits to the shareholders. Out of the profits to the shareholders, right? So here the things we have to remember is, so a share is a subdivision capital of the company measured by total amount sum of the money, and each share has a distinct number, and a shareholder can get a share certificate under the seal of the company, under the common seal. Okay, under the seal of the company, and each and every share has a assigned nominal or face value which is paid by its holder. Okay, each and every share has a definite face value. Each and every share has a definite face value which is paid by its holder, and every year dividend is paid out of profits to shareholder. Every year dividend is paid out of profits to shareholder. Every year dividend is paid out of profits to shareholders, right? So the next, types of shares. The shares issued by a company can be broadly divided into three types. The shares issued by a company can be broadly divided into three types. They are deferred shares, equity shares, preference shares. They are deferred shares, equity shares, preference shares. The shares issued by a company can be broadly divided into three types. They are deferred shares, equity shares, and preference shares. Okay, so a share, it may be a preference share, it may be a deferred shares, it may be a equity share. Okay, a share may be of any type. A share may be of any of these type. A share may be an equity share, a share may be a deferred share, a share may be a preference share. A share may be equity share, preference shares, or deferred share. A share is the share in the share capital of a company. Each and every shareholder, a, a deferred shareholder or a equity shareholder or preference shares, okay, will get a share certificate. Will get a share certificate. Will get a share certificate. Will get a share certificate under the common seal of the company, and all these types of shareholder have rights and responsibilities. All of these shareholders have rights and responsibilities. defined in the articles. Okay, so why the companies issue shares? Why the companies issue shares? The companies issue shares to procure long term capital, to meet the long term requirements, of a company. The company issues shares to meet the long term requirements of the company. Okay, so we already know the company needs three kinds of the capital requirements or financial requirements. Okay, so long term requirement, medium term requirement, short term requirement. So for making arrangement for getting this long term and medium term capital requirements, the companies issues different kinds of shares and debentures. So for the short term requirements, the company will take loans or deposits from the interested people or other financial institution. Generally the rate of interest is more than higher than other deposits, that other amount, that may be the dividend, it is more than the dividend paid on the shares, or it is the more than the interest paid on the debentures. Okay, so we already got the point. To meet the long term requirements of a giant stock company, issue shares. Okay, right? So the shares are different kinds. Deferred shares, equity shares, and preference shares. And each and every share is a definite face value. Each and every share has a definite face value, and each and every shareholder will get a share certificate under the common seal of the company. And they have certain rights and responsibilities defined in the articles. Okay, so the company can broadly divided into three types. The shares issued by a company can be broadly divided into three types: deferred shares, equity shares, preference shares. Deferred shares, equity shares, preference shares. Okay, so first we are going to see deferred shares. deferred shares. Okay, so deferred shares, then we go for equity and preference shares. So what is this deferred shares? These shares are also known as founder shares. Founders shares or management shares. These shares are also known as founders shares or management shares. These shares are also known as founders shares or management shares. That is, these shares are held by the founders of the company. So these shareholders will receive dividend only after preference and equity shareholders. At the time of winding up of company, they receive their capital in the last. They receive their capital in the last. So here, out of these three kinds of different kinds of shares, that is, one is deferred shares, number two is number two is equity shares, and number three is preference shares. Okay, deferred shares, equity shares, preference shares. And preference shares. Okay, deferred shares are called as the founder shares. These shares are also known as founders shares or management shares. management shares. These shares are also known as founders shares or management shares. So these shares are held by the founders of the company. Okay. So some people, the initiator, or we call it as a promoters. It as a promoters. The people who establish the company, who start the company, are called as founders of the company or promoters of the company. Founders of the company are promoters of the company. So the deferred shares are called as, these are not issued to the common public. These deferred shares are not issued to the common public. The deferred shares are also known as founders shares. These are also known as founders shares or management shares. These are held with only the founders of the company. These shares are held with only the founders of the company. The shares are held with the founders of the company. These shares are also known as founder shares or management shares. These shares are held by the founders of the company. Okay. These shares are not issued to the common public. These are not issued to the common public. And the dividend, okay, these shareholders will get dividend. These shareholders will get dividend only after receiving the dividend of, only after receiving the dividend of other shareholders. Okay. So there are another two types of shares are also there, that is equity shares and preference shares. Okay. So it means that the point is saying, okay, so the deferred shares are held with the promoters or the founders of the company. It means that it is saying that these shares are not issued to the common public. These are not issued to the common public. It means that the other two kinds of shares are issued to the common public. The other kinds of two shares, that is equity shares and preference shares, are issued to the public. Okay. And the equity shares and preference shares have some differences. So according to the interest of the people, they can buy either equity shares or preference shares. They can buy either preference shares or equity shares. But the deferred shares are the founder shares. Deferred shares are the founder shares, and these are not issued, to the common public. These shares are held with only the founders. These are allotted to the founders of the company. Company. Right. That is the one point, main important point. Okay. So the deferred, you have to remember, differs are held with only the founders. These are not issued to the common public. And these are held with only the founders of the company, those who establish, those initiates, promoters, right? So the second point is, these shareholders will get dividend. These shareholders will get dividend only after receiving the dividend of preference and equity shareholders. Okay. These shareholders will get dividend only after receiving the dividend of preference and equity shareholders. Okay. Preference shareholders, and it means that first the dividend will be received, will the first importance, the first priority or the importance in distributing, okay, in distributing the dividend to first equity, uh, out of these three shares, equity shareholders and preference shareholders. If the amount is left over after completion of all these distributions in the profits of the company, if any amount is left over, then that amount is distributed to the founders or promoters, or to the deferred shareholders, that is the second point. And the third point is, at the time of winding up of the company, they receive their capital in the last. Okay, so if the company is going to be wind up after some years, any company after some years generally, so the company at the time of winding up of a company, so their capital, it means the deferred shareholders capital, it means the founders or the promoters will get their capital back after receiving the capital back of equity and preference shareholders. It means the last priority out of these three shareholders, that is equity, deferred, preference. Out of these three shareholders, equity shareholders, deferred shareholders, and preference shareholders. So, in case of dividend or in case of giving the capital back, the priority, last priority is given to the final priority given to the deferred shareholders. The final priority is given to the deferred shareholders. The last priority is given to the deferred shareholders. This point we have to remember. This point we have to remember. Okay, clear? Okay, so the deferred shares are called as the founder shares. The deferred shareholders, the deferred shares held with the founders of the company, and these are called as the founder shares. These people will get, the deferred shareholders will get dividend after completion of distributing either dividend or interest to the shareholders and debentures of all. Very last they will get the dividend. And in case of closing of a company also, they will get last chance, giving back to the capital, okay. So in today's class, I have clearly explained you, that is what is the share, and what are the features of share, and what are the types of shares. In that, one of the types of share is deferred share. Okay, in today's class I have clearly explained you how the company is going to be procure long-term capital, long-term financial arrangements, that is in the form of shares and debentures. In this class, that is various types of shares. So in that, what is a share, definition of a share, okay, definition of a share, and futures of a share, and the features of a share, and different types of share. These are three types of shares, that is deferred shares, equity shares, and preference shares. Deferred shares, equity shares, and preference shares. Okay, these are the three types of shares. Under that, the first one, that is deferred shares, that is founders shares. Okay, so the founders shares held with the founders of the company, promoters of the company, right? Okay, founders are promoters of the company, and these people are the founders shares. Deferred shareholders will get dividend, uh, they will get dividend uh, after receiving the dividend of all other shareholders, and they receive back their capital at the time of closing of a company, after receiving all types of shareholders and debenture holders and everything. Okay, if the amount is left over. So that is the features of deferred shares. And the next class, in continuation of this one, in the next class there are another two types of shares are there, that is equity shares and preference shares. So what is that equity share and what is the preference shares? And there are so many types of there in preference shares. There are so many types of shares in preference shares. And another one, debentures. what is a debenture and the types of debentures. Okay, we shall see in the next class. Okay, thank you.